Hi, I'm Sarah, I'm 29, and I'll never forget the night my parents handed my sister $80 million, a mansion, and a Tesla, while I sat in silence, invisible at the same table. What happened after that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about family drama, betrayal, and emotional courage. The sound of clinking glasses still rings in my ears, sharp and echoing, like a cruel reminder of where I stood that night. My parents stood at the head of the long oak table, their smiles wide, their eyes glowing, not at me, but at my sister, Amanda. I sat 3 seats down, my hands wrapped around a cold glass of water, watching as the spotlight of affection, pride, and wealth landed squarely on her. "Here's to Amanda," my father declared, his voice steady, filled with a kind of pride I had long stopped waiting to hear in connection with my name. For all her hard work, her brilliance, and for making us proud enough to hand her what she deserves, $80 million, her own mansion, and a brand new Tesla. The room erupted in applause. Some cousins whistled, aunts clapped so hard their bracelets jingled against the table, and even my usually reserved uncle smiled. Amanda grinned, tossing her blonde hair over one shoulder, pretending to blush, though I knew her too well. She loved every second of this. I sat there, my lips pressed into a thin line, pretending to sip from my glass. The water tasted bitter, though nothing had been added to it. Amanda lifted a velvet box from the table, opening it with slow, dramatic flair. Inside lay 2 shiny keys, one for the mansion, one for the Tesla. She held them up as though she had just been crowned queen. I glanced at my mother, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that she'd meet my eyes, even for a moment. But her gaze never shifted from Amanda. The silence inside me was deafening. It wasn't shock, this was a pattern, one I had lived with my whole life. But that night, the betrayal had grown teeth. "Don't be so quiet, Sarah," my Aunt Carol called down the table. "You should be proud of your sister." Her words sliced through the air, but what hurt more was the laughter that followed from a few relatives, as though my silence itself were a joke. Proud? Of what? That my parents had poured everything into Amanda while I scraped together rent each month? That they had chosen her dreams over mine every single time? The dinner continued, each course served with layers of praise for Amanda. Stories of her hard work, tales of her dedication, all spoon-fed to the audience like gospel. No one mentioned the sacrifices I had made, the part-time jobs I worked in college so Amanda could focus on school, the way I gave up my own college fund when Dad said there wasn't enough for both of us. At one point, Amanda leaned over, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Don't worry, Sarah," she whispered. "When I get the Tesla, maybe I'll give you a ride, if you're not too busy waitressing." The smirk she wore afterward was a mirror image of our mothers. I wanted to say something, anything. But I didn't. Not there. Not while the entire family looked at me like I was background noise. Instead, I studied the room. The chandelier light reflected in the polished glasses, the rich scent of roasted lamb filled the air, and laughter rippled like a song I couldn't sing. For a moment, I felt like a guest in my own family. Then came the most humiliating blow. My father raised his glass again. "We couldn't have asked for a better daughter," he said, his eyes fixed on Amanda. Better daughter. Singular. It was as though I didn't exist at all. The words rattled in my chest, threatening to burst out, but I forced them down. My chest ached, my palms burned from clenching them so tightly beneath the tablecloth. Dinner ended with applause, hugs, and photos. Amanda posed with her new keys, leaning against Dad for a picture while Mom kissed her cheek. No one asked me to be in the frame. I slipped out early, pretending to answer a call that never came. My coat felt heavier than usual, though all it carried was my phone and a wallet with barely enough for groceries. The night air outside bit at my skin, sharp and unforgiving. I stood by my car, an old, dented Honda that wheezed every time it started, and stared back at the glowing windows of the house. Inside, they were still laughing, celebrating, clinking glasses. Not one of them noticed I had left. I slid into the driver's seat, but my hands didn't move to the wheel. Instead, I sat there, listening to the engine tick from the chill. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me, not just anger, not just sorrow, but a simmering resolve. It wasn't fair. It had never been fair. But if my parents thought this night would be the end of me, they were wrong. As I pulled out of the driveway, Amanda's laughter echoed faintly behind me. But in that sound, I no longer heard victory. I heard the spark of a war I never asked for but was now ready to fight. The night I drove away from my parents' house, the road stretched out like a tunnel I didn't know how to escape. The glow of the mansion behind me disappeared in the rearview mirror, swallowed by the dark. Ahead, my little apartment waited, not warm, not welcoming, just there. By the time I pulled into the cracked parking lot of my building, the Honda's engine wheezed in protest, as if it too were tired of carrying my weight. I sat there for a moment, staring at the chipped paint on the staircase leading to my door. My neighbors' blinds glowed faintly, families laughing, couples watching TV, someone cooking late-night spaghetti. My life, in comparison, felt quiet. Too quiet. Inside, my apartment greeted me with the faint smell of instant noodles. A stack of unopened bills waited on the counter like unwelcome guests. Rent. Utilities. Insurance. Each envelope screamed louder than the last. I dropped my keys on the table and sank into the sagging couch. The silence pressed in. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through social media. The first thing on my feed was Amanda, her new Tesla parked in front of the mansion, captioned, "Hard work pays off, 2 hearts #blessed." My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to block her, but another part couldn't look away. It was like watching a fire. You hate the heat, but you can't stop staring. The comments underneath stung more than the post itself. "So proud of you, Amanda. Your parents must be over the moon. You're such an inspiration." Not a single mention of me. Not that I expected one. I tossed the phone aside and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The next morning, I woke before dawn. My shift at the diner started at 6, and the walk-in fridge didn't care if I had been humiliated the night before. I tied my apron tight, forcing a smile as I greeted regulars with their usual orders. "Morning, Sarah," old Mr. Thompson said, sliding into his corner booth. "Coffee, black, and 2 eggs, like always." I nodded, pen poised over my notepad. "Coming right up." At work, I was invisible in a different way. Customers didn't know me beyond their refills, and that was almost a relief. No one asked about my family. No one expected me to explain why my sister was a millionaire and I was scraping by on tips. But in quiet moments, when I wiped down the counter or carried plates back to the kitchen, my thoughts circled like vultures. Every memory clawed at me, my dad refusing to co-sign my college loan, my mom saying, "You don't need fancy degrees, Sarah. You're practical." All the while, Amanda was handed tutors, travel, and every opportunity one had begged for. By noon, the diner was buzzing. A group of teenagers laughed at the next booth, their sneakers squeaking against the floor. One of them pointed to my uniform and joked loudly, "Imagine doing this for the rest of your life." His friends roared with laughter. I smiled tightly, setting down their fries. "Enjoy your meal." Inside, my chest burned. Their words weren't meant for me, but they fit like a glove. That evening, after my shift, I walked home. My car had stalled that morning, and I didn't have the money to tow it. The streetlights flickered as I passed, casting shadows that seemed to follow me. A group of kids played basketball in the cracked lot nearby, their shouts echoing into the night. I envied their energy, their belief that the world might still give them something. When I reached my apartment, I found a pink notice taped to my door, "Final warning, rent due." I crumpled it in my hand, leaning against the doorframe. My landlord's patience was running out, and so was mine. Inside, I pulled out an old showbox from the back of my closet. It was filled with mementos, photos from high school, scribbled notes from friends, a dried corsage from prom. Buried beneath was a photo of Amanda and me as kids. We were on the swings at the park, both smiling, both free of the weight that would later divide us. I traced the edge of the photo with my finger. Somewhere along the way, we had stopped being sisters. Or maybe we never truly were. The next day at work, I saw Amanda again, though not in person. A customer at the counter scrolled through her phone, showing off a video. There Amanda was, waving at cameras, standing beside her Tesla, her hair perfect, her laugh rehearsed. "She's amazing," the customer gushed. "Can you believe she's only 27? I bit my tongue until it nearly bled. Later that night, I stopped by the grocery store. My cart held the bare minimum: bread, milk, a bag of rice. At the checkout, my card was declined. Heat rushed to my face as the cashier said quietly, "Do you want to try again?" I fumbled for cash, barely covering the total. The man behind me sighed loudly, muttering about how long it was taking. Walking out with my single bag of groceries, the shame sat heavier than the food. I wondered how Amanda would spin this moment if it were hers. Probably a quirky Instagram story about keeping it real. By the time I reached home, my determination from that night had dimmed, smothered under bills, exhaustion, and invisible scars. But then, sitting in my apartment, I realized something. This couldn't be all there was. I couldn't let their choices define me forever. I didn't know how yet, but the thought began to take root, that somewhere in this shadowed life, there had to be a way forward. A way to claw back the dignity they'd stripped from me. For the first time, I let the possibility settle into my bones. The thought of clawing back my dignity sat with me all night, tugging at me like an itch I couldn't scratch. Sleep never came. When the alarm buzzed at 5, my body ached, but I forced myself out of bed. Bills didn't care if you were tired. Rent didn't pause just because you were broken. By 6, I was back at the diner, the smell of burnt coffee and grease already clinging to my uniform. The bell above the door chimed with each customer, the same faces on the same stools, ordering the same meals. Routine was safe, predictable, until it wasn't. It was around mid-morning, after the breakfast rush had thinned, that he walked in. At first glance, nothing about him stood out. A grey jacket, worn at the edges. A ball cap pulled low. He looked like any other older man passing through town. But the way he studied me, quiet, careful, made me uneasy. "Coffee?" I asked, sliding the menu toward him. He nodded, his voice rough but polite. "Black. No sugar." When I brought it over, he held my gaze longer than most customers dared. His eyes were sharp, almost searching. "Your name's Sarah, right?" I froze, pitcher in hand. "Yeah. Do I know you?" "Not directly." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "But I knew your family. A long time ago." My pulse quickened. Strangers sometimes recognized Amanda. She was all over local news and social media, but no one ever connected me to my parents. No one cared to. "Sorry," I said carefully. "I think you've got the wrong person." He shook his head slowly. "No. I remember your father. And your mother. I also remember a promise that was broken." I set the picture down, trying to keep my voice steady. "What promise?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled a small envelope from his coat and slid it across the counter. The paper was worn, edges soft, as though it had been carried for years. "This belongs to you," he said. "I've been holding on to it, waiting for the right time. Last night, when I heard the announcement about your sister, I figured that time has come." The room seemed to shrink around me. The hum of the diner, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, all of it faded. My hand hovered over the envelope, but I didn't touch it. "What is this?" I whispered. "Truth," he replied simply. I stared at him, searching for some hint of trickery. He didn't look dangerous. Just tired. Like someone carrying a burden too heavy for too long. "Why now?" I asked. His lips curved into a thin smile, though there was no joy in it. "Because people like your parents count on silence lasting forever." I decided not to stay silent anymore. Before I could ask another question, the bell above the door chimed. A group of construction workers shuffled in, loud and hungry, and the moment shattered. I tucked the envelope under my order pad, my hands trembling as I poured more coffee, scribbled down orders, forced myself to move as though nothing had shifted. But everything had. When I turned back to the counter, the stool where he sat was empty. His coffee mug sat half full, a crumpled $5 bill beneath it. No name. No explanation. He was gone. I stood there, staring at the space he had left behind, the envelope burning a hole against my hip. That evening, when my shift finally ended, I carried it home as though it were fragile, like it might shatter if I moved too quickly. The sky was grey, rain threatening to fall. Each step toward my apartment felt heavier, my mind spiraling with questions. Who was he? Why me? What did my parents hide? Inside, I set the envelope on the table, afraid to open it. I circled the room, cleaning dishes that were already clean, folding blankets that didn't need folding. Anything to avoid the weight of what sat waiting for me. At one point, I caught my reflection in the window, tired eyes, hair pulled back, uniform still smelling of grease. For so long, I had been the forgotten daughter, the afterthought. But now, maybe, just maybe, this envelope could change that. I sat down, my fingers brushing the paper's edge. The flap was sealed, though barely, as if time itself had loosened it. I traced the crease, debating whether to rip it open right then or wait until I felt stronger. But was I ever going to feel stronger? A knock on the door startled me. I shoved the envelope into my bag, my heart racing. It was Mrs. Walker, my neighbor from across the hall, holding a container of leftover lasagna. "Thought you might want some," she said warmly. "You've been working too hard." I forced a smile. "Thanks. That means a lot." Her kindness was a stark contrast to the coldness I had grown up with. I accepted the food, small talk filling the silence. When she left, I sat back down at the table, the envelope still waiting. The rain finally started outside, tapping against the glass. I leaned forward, pulling it closer, my breath catching in my throat. And that was when I realized, I wasn't afraid of what was inside. I was afraid of confirming what I had always suspected, that my parents hadn't just overlooked me. They had stolen something that was meant to be mine. The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling in the distance. My hands shook as I held the envelope, its weight heavier than anything I had ever carried. For the first time in years, the shadows around me felt alive, not just empty darkness, but the edge of a revelation that could break everything open. The storm pressed harder against the windows, the glass trembling beneath the thunder's weight. My palms were damp as they gripped the envelope, the paper soft and fragile against my fingers. It felt absurd that something so thin, so ordinary-looking, could carry the power to shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. I told myself to breathe, but the air caught in my throat. With trembling hands, I slid a finger beneath the flap and tore it open. The sound was sharper than it should have been, like fabric ripping through silence. Inside was a stack of folded pages, yellowed, creased, smelling faintly of time. My heart stuttered as I unfolded the first one. The handwriting was familiar, neat yet bold, like someone who wrote with confidence, my father's. To be opened by Sarah when the time is right. My stomach clenched. It wasn't just any letter. It was meant for me. I scanned the opening lines, my eyes darting so quickly the words blurred. Sarah, if you're reading this, then circumstances have changed in ways I couldn't predict. I want you to know this truth. You were never forgotten. What was meant for you was taken, and I was too weak to stop it. I dropped the page onto the table, staring at it as though it had burned me. My father, the man who never looked my way, who handed everything to Amanda like she was his chosen child, had written words that contradicted every memory etched into my heart. Shaking, I picked it back up. The ink had bled slightly where the pen pressed too hard, as if written in urgency. Years ago, before you were even old enough to understand, a man came to me with an opportunity. I was supposed to divide what was given, half for Amanda, half for you. But your mother, she convinced me to sign it all to your sister. She promised it was temporary, that she would set it right. I believed her. That was my failure. I pressed my hand to my mouth, the room tilting around me. Half. Half of what? $80 million? A mansion? A Tesla? All those headlines flashing across news screens. It was supposed to be split between us? Tears blurred the ink. My chest heaved, a sound escaping me that was half sob, half laughter. All this time, I thought I was invisible, unwanted. But the truth was worse. I had been erased. I turned to the next page, My father's words cutting deeper. I wanted to fight back, but your mother had the papers drawn up with lawyers I couldn't challenge. They made me sign. And then I stayed silent. I'm sorry, Sarah. You deserved better. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the letter. Images of my mother's cold smile flashed through my mind. The way she favored Amanda, the casual cruelty in her dismissive words. It wasn't favoritism. It was theft. A deliberate choice to rob me of a life that was rightfully mine. The last page was shorter, rushed. If this reaches you, it means someone finally chose to keep my promise alive. Take this letter, Sarah. Don't let silence bury you the way it buried me. I sat back in my chair, the storm raging louder outside. My chest felt hollow, like a cavern echoing with memories I could no longer trust. All the nights I cried myself to sleep believing I wasn't enough, all the birthdays forgotten, all the moments Amanda was celebrated while I was ignored, none of it was about my worth. It was about greed, manipulation, lies. The envelope wasn't empty. At the bottom, beneath the folded pages, was a single photograph. I lifted it with trembling fingers. It showed my father holding me as a toddler, his face lit with a smile I had no memory of. His eyes weren't cold, weren't distant. They were proud, loving. My breath caught. I had no photographs like this. None. My childhood albums were filled with Amanda's milestones, Amanda's birthdays, Amanda's achievements. But here, frozen in time, was proof that once, before everything was stolen, he saw me. I pressed the photo to my chest, my sobs shaking the room. The thunder outside answered me, like the sky itself shared my rage. For a long time, I sat there, letters spread across the table, the photograph clutched in my hands. The storm blurred the world beyond my window, but inside, clarity cut sharp and cruel. I wasn't unloved. I was betrayed. At some point, I lit the small lamp on the table, the yellow glow bathing the papers in a soft light. I reread the words, slower this time, each sentence carving itself into my bones. My father's apology didn't erase the years of neglect, but it cracked the foundation I had built my survival on. The ground beneath me wasn't just shaky, it was false. A knock at the door jolted me upright. My heart pounded as I scrambled to hide the papers back inside the envelope, shoving it beneath a stack of magazines. Sarah. Mrs. Walker's voice drifted through the door again. Everything all right, honey? I heard. She hesitated. I heard crying. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. I'm fine. Thank you. All right. Her footsteps retreated, and silence returned, heavy and suffocating. I pulled the envelope back out, pressing my thumb over my father's name. His words echoed in my head. Don't let silence bury you the way it buried me. Lightning lit up the room, and in that brief flash, I saw myself in the reflection of the window. Not the forgotten daughter anymore, but someone holding evidence of the truth. The storm outside had finally broken open. So had I. And nothing would ever be the same. The storm hadn't quieted by morning. Its fury had softened into a steady drizzle, but the air carried that heavy scent of earth and wet concrete, as if the world itself was trying to wash something clean. I sat at my small kitchen table, the envelope spread open before me, the letters stacked neatly, the photograph resting on top like a crown. Sleep hadn't come. My eyes burned, my body ached, but my mind was alive in a way it hadn't been in years. The words from my father pulsed inside me. Don't let silence bury you the way it buried me. I traced the photograph with my thumb. My father holding me, his face bright with pride. For so long I thought he never cared. Now I knew he did, but my mother and sister had stolen more than money. They had stolen proof of love. The anger rose, sharp and hot, curling in my chest. This wasn't just about wealth. This was about every scraped knee ignored, every birthday forgotten, every cruel smirk Amanda threw my way while holding the keys to a life that should have been shared. I couldn't keep this hidden. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I landed on Amanda's number. My finger hovered, trembling. Calling her felt reckless, but confronting her face to face? That was worse. Still, I pressed call. The line rang twice before she answered. Her voice was groggy, annoyed. Sarah, do you have any idea what time it is? It's late enough for you to face me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I know the truth. There was a pause, a sharp inhale. Then, a scoff. What are you talking about now? The money. The inheritance. Dad's letter. I know what you and Mom did. The silence that followed was thicker than the storm clouds outside. Finally, Amanda laughed, a short, cruel sound. So you finally found out. What? Did some dusty old paper fall into your lap? Let me guess, he wrote you one of his pathetic apologies. My grip on the phone tightened. You stole from me. Her tone turned icy. Correction. Mom made sure the money went where it belonged. To me. You wouldn't have known what to do with it, Sarah. You've always been weak. Her words sliced deeper than I expected. Weak. That word had followed me all my life. But this time, something inside me snapped. You think money makes you strong? You think living in that mansion, driving that car, makes you untouchable? You're wrong. I've got proof. Dad's words. His signature. His truth. And I won't stay quiet anymore. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Then she hissed, "Don't you dare. You'll ruin everything." Good, I whispered. Maybe that's exactly what I need to do. I hung up before she could answer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter anymore. I was someone with power, truth on my side. By noon, I was sitting in a lawyer's office downtown. The man across from me, grey-haired with kind eyes, adjusted his glasses as he read the letter. His brow furrowed deeper with every line. "This is significant, Sarah," he said finally. "If your father's intent was for you to receive half, and this letter can be authenticated, you may have grounds to challenge the estate distribution." The weight of his words settled over me. I had the chance to reclaim not just money, but dignity, proof that I was never meant to be erased. But it won't be easy, he warned. Cases like this tear families apart. Are you ready for that? I thought of Amanda's laughter, my mother's cold smile, the years of silence. My answer came without hesitation. They already tore it apart. I'm just done pretending. 2 weeks later, we met in a conference room, Amanda, Mom, their lawyer, and me with mine. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Amanda sat across from me, dressed in designer clothes that screamed money but not peace. Mom sat stiffly beside her, eyes narrowed like daggers. I placed the letter on the table, sliding it forward. Dad wanted me to have half. You both knew it. Mom's lips curled. Your father didn't know what he wanted. He was confused, weak. Then why hide his words? I shot back. Why bury this letter? Why erase me? Amanda's jaw tightened. For once, she wasn't smiling. The lawyers spoke in circles, tossing around words like intent and validity, but I wasn't listening to them. I was watching my mother's face, seeing the flicker of panic in her eyes when my lawyer mentioned fraudulent manipulation. For the first time, she looked small. The case stretched on for months, but each step gave me strength. Every hearing, every deposition, every document brought the truth into the light. My family's empire wasn't built on love or merit. It was built on lies. And slowly, it began to crumble. The final ruling came on a quiet Tuesday. I stood in court, my hands clasped, as the judge declared the inheritance must be redivided. Half to Amanda, half to me. 80 million. A mansion. A car. All suddenly within reach. But as the gavel fell, I realized something unexpected. The money didn't matter as much as I thought it would. What mattered was that the silence was broken. That I wasn't invisible anymore. That my father's words had set me free. Months later, I stood outside my new home, not the mansion Amanda clung to, but a modest place I chose for myself. The air was crisp, the garden small but mine. Amanda still refused to speak to me. Mom's anger had hardened into silence. And strangely, I didn't mind. Their absence was quieter than their cruelty had ever been. I walked inside, setting the framed photograph of my father on the mantel. His smile looked back at me, proud and steady. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. I didn't let silence bury me. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Revenge had fueled me, but resolution, choosing my own path, free from their shadows, was the real victory. The storm was finally over.